is your favorite aspect of Indigenous American culture? Perhaps it's Mayan temples, like Chichen Itza, which once dominated the landscape of Mesoamerica. Or maybe the teepees of the Plains natives, whose lifestyle was centered on hunting the buffalo. It could even be the intricate totem poles of the indigenous peoples of the Northwest. Whatever you envision, many commonly make the mistake of thinking of Native Americans as one culture. But during the Middle Ages, and for centuries before, North and South America were home to a rich diversity of cultures and civilizations. Literally, thousands of different cultural groups and millions of indigenous peoples lived throughout the two continents. Each of these groups was merely a piece of fabric in the cultural quilt that represents the many diverse indigenous peoples of the Americas. Each of these civilizations had unique lifestyles and important contributions to human history. That leads us to our world history mystery. How did the diverse indigenous cultures of the Americas shape their societies and influence human history? As we investigate civilizations to answer that question, we'll explore their cultural achievements and contributions. Are you ready, historians? You may remember from a previous course some of the larger, most significant civilizations found in North and South America. Can you name a few? They include the Maya, famous for their Mesoamerican pyramids and mathematics, their neighbors, the Aztecs, whose capital city of Tenochtitlan was located where Mexico City stands today, and the Incas, whose home in South America's Andes Mountains featured the architectural marvel called Machu Picchu. Even though these were among the largest civilizations, there were many others across both continents that had just as many contributions to our world. We can't investigate all of the thousands of indigenous cultures that were found in the Americas in a short video, but we can take a look at some of them. As we check out these early American civilizations, be sure to look for common threads that stitch many of these unique cultures together into the patchwork quilt of indigenous cultures. Our goal is to dive into the diversity of America's thousands of indigenous cultures and check out the ways they influenced our world. Also known as the Anasazi, the ancestral Puebloans lived in what is now the southwestern United States. Do you think you know what the Puebloans are best known for? They're most famous for their unique cliff dwellings, such as those at Mesa Verde, and large multicolored structures called pueblos, made from adobe bricks. Why would the Anasazi build their homes on cliffs? Pause here to respond. While there were other benefits, such as protection from the weather, the main reason the Puebloans built their homes in cliffs was for defense purposes. Can you see how that would be difficult to attack? They're protected by rock on most sides, so the Puebloans have great protection, but they look like they could get really hot. I wonder how these folks stayed cool. The ancestral Puebloans were skilled farmers, even though they didn't get a lot of rain here. How's that work? Oh, I get it. They used irrigation systems to water their crops. They had extensive trade networks across the Southwest and created intricate pottery and textiles to swap for other goods. Kivas, ceremonial underground rooms, played a big role in their religious and social life, serving as spaces for community gatherings and rituals. Hey, why do you think the ancestral Puebloans used underground rooms for their rituals and gatherings? The kivas were much cooler and shaded. This is one way they beat the heat. And their ingenuity in adapting to their surroundings continues to inspire people even today. For example, modern architects often study these ancient techniques to design energy-efficient buildings that stay cool in hot climates without relying on air conditioning. Our next indigenous culture didn't really have that issue. The Northwest Coast natives lived along the Pacific from southern Alaska to northern California. How do you think the environment influenced the way of life for the Northwest Coast natives? Pause here to respond. Northwest Coast peoples are known for their rich cultural traditions and artistic achievements, but are maybe most famous for their magnificent totem poles. These artistic carvings represent the family history and the culture of the people who made them. They carved the totem poles from these massive cedar logs. Those are huge! I wonder if they used them for anything else. Those cedar logs, they would make great cabins, right? They built large wooden houses out of those. Talk about a solid structure. Mastery of the water was important. The indigenous economy in the Northwest was based largely on fishing, and salmon was one of their main foods. They fished for salmon and more in the Pacific and used long spears to hunt whales. It would take a big canoe to try to catch a whale. The Northwest natives also used canoes for travel and trade up and down the coast. Wait, are you thinking what I'm thinking? About the canoes? Yeah, they built the canoes out of those cedar logs, just like their homes. And you could cut long spears from the logs, too. Another unique facet of Northwest culture was potlatch ceremonies, which involved huge feasts and giving gifts. Potlatch ceremonies were really important to Northwest culture, reinforcing social status and community bonds. The generosity demonstrated in the potlatch ceremony and the artistic traditions of totem poles provided a clear legacy of the Northwest people in today's world. Isn't it cool how each of these cultures has their own customs and traditions? And have you noticed how their ways of life seem to be based on their environment? Mississippian culture flourished in the Mississippi River Valley. These folks were best known for building large earthen mounds. Don't you wonder what these mounds might have been used for? Cahokia, near present-day St. Louis, was the largest Mississippian city, with a massive monk's mound at the center. Looking at the image, what would be some challenges in building the mounds? Pause here to respond. The Mississippian people had no modern machines like bulldozers to build the mounds. All the hard work was done using tools made from stone and wood. Impressive, huh? These things took years, sometimes even decades to build. Imagine how difficult it may have been for them to organize the construction of these mounds. And since the work is so difficult, I wonder what social class were the ones building them. How do you think social structure impacted the construction of the mounds? Mississippian society was similar to many early cultures. People at the bottom of the social structure would be the ones doing most of the work. When they weren't working on the mound, those same folks were growing crops to feed everyone. The Mississippians worshipped many gods, and respect for nature was important to these people. Their chiefs helped with religious rituals. Wait a second. If religion is important to the Mississippians, and they worked so hard to build these mounds, I bet they used them for religious ceremonies. Probably any big event or ritual was held right on top of the mound. The Mississippian people engaged in extensive trade networks, swapping goods such as pottery, tools, and shells across vast distances throughout the river valley. These trade networks helped to connect their communities and made cultural exchanges happen throughout the region. As humongous as some of these mounds are, folks traveling up and down the river could see them from far away. Because the Mississippians left artifacts, bones, and more inside the mounds as they were building them, archaeologists have been able to study the man-made hills. This has helped historians learn more about Mississippian trade and other cultural practices, and their relationships with other indigenous cultures. Also known as the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy was a powerful alliance of 6 Native American nations that lived primarily in the northeastern United States and what is now New York State. Would you believe that the Iroquois influenced the U.S. Constitution? It's true. The Iroquois developed a sophisticated political system known as the Great Law of Peace, which governed their confederacy and inspired ideas for the Founding Fathers. Think about the role of the U.S. Constitution in American society today. How do you think the Great Law of Peace helped the Iroquois Confederacy stay united? When the Confederacy made a decision, all of the member tribes had to abide by that law. Can you think of how that might apply to the United States today? One example is how all 50 states must obey U.S. laws, like the freedom of speech in the First Amendment, or U.S. Supreme Court rulings. The Iroquois lived in longhouses, large wooden structures that housed multiple families. The Iroquois were excellent farmers and grew the Three Sisters crops: maize, beans, and squash. The name stuck because the Iroquois usually grew them together and relied on them greatly as a food source. Are you seeing some common threads among the indigenous cultures? We've learned a lot about the amazing patchwork of indigenous cultures, from the Mississippians and their mounds to the Anasazi and their cliff dwellings. Think about what we've studied today. What similarities or common threads do you see in how these cultures thrived? Each of these societies was great at farming. In fact, a majority of the world's crops today were first grown by indigenous Americans, and they emphasized trade. Their cultural mosaic was blended through trade and other cultural exchanges, demonstrating a cooperative spirit of learning from one another. It's notable that each of these civilizations had amazing accomplishments that required intelligence and teamwork. They were skilled at using the resources of their surroundings to not only survive, but thrive. It's awesome that their geography and other factors led to each of these cultures succeeding in their own unique ways. As for our world history mystery question, that's been fully answered. Nice work, historians. Next time, we circle back to Asia to investigate the birth of a religion that even today impacts world events. Until then, keep exploring the past and shaping the future. And remember to always be clever. Hey, hey.